Hey everybody, welcome to Milwaukee Music Lessons. My name is Alex Bennett. In this episode, I'm going to go over 5 things that I commonly see in beginner guitar players or newer guitar players, things that we could just touch up that were a little rough around the edges. Maybe you're, just getting into the beginning of this process and you're looking for quick ways that you could improve, things that you could be a little more diligent about, right? I'm just going to go over 5 of some of the most common mistakes that I see from newer players coming in. So with that being said, let's get right into the list. Number 1 comes down to strictly practice time and also learning how to practice. Now, if you remember back to your high school days, or maybe you are still in high school, but I don't know about you, I was never great at just cramming right before a test. It did not work for me. I often had to practice or, study for like a couple days at least before the test. It wasn't just a matter of like, oh, I'll read like 20 minutes before and it all sticks in. Doesn't work that way, right? The same thing goes with practicing guitar. If you're practicing, if you, let's say, have an hour of total practice time in, it's much better that you practice for, say, 10 minutes a day than you have that one day that you practice for 60 minutes. And there's a lot of reasons behind that psychologically, but also there's some physical limitations too. When you're first starting up, you don't have the ginormal calluses, so playing for an hour is really not, something that is easy for most people. And you're gonna start to create some bad habits, some bad tendencies in order to come over some of those physical limitations as well. So really what you want to do is you want to just practice frequently, and you want to get to the point where this thing starts to feel like a t-shirt. The second thing, though, about practicing that I quite often see is if I give somebody a song or a piece of music or something to work on, a common beginner mistake is that they'll just play from beginning to end the same line over and over and over, right? But if that line is extremely long, like maybe that whole segment is 16 notes and you can't go more than 2 or 3 notes without making a mistake, well then it's best to focus on tiny little pieces at a time. And it doesn't matter if it's just one segment that's giving you a problem or if it's the entire thing, right? You need to focus on the parts that you're not doing well at. There's a difference between practicing and performing. And so you really want to make sure that you're practicing the things that you're not good at, so that way when it comes time to perform those things, you've put as much effort into the things that need to be worked on as need to be worked on, right? Practicing is for improving the things we're not good at, as opposed to just playing is for celebrating the things that we are good at. Number 2 thing that I see out of newer players is just simply proper finger placement. Seems like an obvious one, but I think sometimes we ignore some of the obvious things. And so I'm going to go over really quickly kind of the 2 different finger placement styles, or, kind of the 2 primary ways that you can hold things down. And it really depends on what it is that you're playing. So first of all, I think most people instinctively play a little bit more on the flat-fingered side. So if you're playing single notes, this is perfectly acceptable, right? Because I don't care if I'm accidentally touching like the D string while I'm trying to play on the A string. That's fine, because I only want the A string to play anyways. So if you're playing single notes, or if you're playing, like power chords, then that's more of an acceptable technique, because you're trying to play as few notes as possible, right? But if you're trying to do something more along the lines of like a open chord, then this is going to be really paramount that you start using the tips of your fingers, right? Our goal here is to play the majority of the strings on the guitar, not the minority. And so we need to make sure that we're out of the way, that everything can ring out and strum nice and clean. And so I think that even for people who know this, one of the problems that they have is that they don't understand how to get around. Usually I see players, they try to get around by like extending their wrist out like this, but what you'll notice is that the tips of my fingers don't really change when I get my wrist out like this. How this gets better is when we take our knuckles and we're able to bend them very much from the ends to try and get around the strings. So you really want to learn how to bend well from the ends of your fingers, get your knuckles clamped down, and then try to keep the palm of your hand stuck to the back of the neck, not the palm, but like the fat part of your thumb here stuck to the back of the neck, and really bend from the ends of those fingers, and you'll see that you should have more success getting around the strings like that. Number 3 is learning how to hold your pick properly. Now, full disclosure here, I have a little bit of a weird way of holding the pick in that I hold it with my middle finger. And some of this is a carryover from the way that I hold a pencil. When I write stuff, I hold a pencil with my middle finger a lot, with my pointer finger kind of resting on the pick when I play. I don't teach that to students, but I do, just kind of full disclosure, that's how I have held a pick. But it doesn't change what I'm about to show you, which is probably the thing that most people get wrong, which is that a lot of times they end up holding the pick just dangling, as much of it hanging out as humanly possible. And this is really hard for a number of reasons. The further that it hangs out, the more likely you are to drop the pick. There's nothing more frustrating than having to dig that pick out from the sound hole, right? Or, picking it up off the ground. It's a little bit embarrassing, especially when you're trying to show off for somebody, right? Or for your teacher. And also, it's really hard to be accurate with something hanging out so far. If you've ever tried to pick something up with like a lever, a pencil, a shark grabber from, the drugstore, whatever. It's much more difficult when you're, on the end, trying to grab something with that stick or trying to balance something, from the edges there. So what we really want to do is we want to learn how to choke up on the pick. And the way that we're going to do that, let me go over to my other camera here. The way that we're going to do that is we're going to stick our thumb kind of straight up and down. And we want the pick to basically line up, almost like a flagpole, where like the flag is leading out and we're kind of at a 90-degree angle to our thumb here. And then for most other people, they'll take their pointer finger and they're going to kind of curl it around. But from the back side, you really only want a very small portion, less than 1/4 of an inch, I would say, of the pick hanging out. You should be at the point where your thumb almost brushes against the string when you play the guitar. And that's to your advantage, because I think we all instinctively know where the thumb lies. We have a better grip on what we're hitting when we touch if we were to touch the guitar with our fingers. So, try to choke up on the pick, get that 90-degree angle. It promotes good posture and good form with your right hand, and really just make sure that you're getting the direction and getting as much grip on it as possible, and better contact. Mistake number 4 that I commonly see is using the right fingers. Most of us are naturally better with our pointer or our middle finger at anything involving dexterity, and so that often causes us to not want to use the ring or pinky, or even just using only one finger to do everything. And that's going to run into limitations and problems pretty quickly, because anything that involves speed is you're going to be less accurate, because you're going to have to be constantly sliding up and down the neck. What we want to try and do is, if possible, we want to assign a finger per fret. So maybe the segment that I'm working on, the lowest note that we run into is on fret 2. So we would call this second position. And the idea here is effectively that we're going to do our pointer finger on fret 2, our middle finger on fret 3, our ring on fret 4, and our pinky on fret 5. So anything that shows up in fret 2 is going to be covered by my pointer finger. Anything that shows up in fret 3 will be my middle. Anything that shows up in fret 4 will be my ring finger, and anything that shows up in fret 5 will be done with my pinky. And that just promotes, efficiency. We want to, we want to train our hands to get that muscle memory down, because when it comes time to playing fast and accurate don't have to be mutually exclusive. But if you do stick with the bad technique of trying to use just one or two fingers, or really relying on those, you're going to run into a brick wall eventually, and probably faster than you think. Last one, number 5 here, and this is a silly one, but it is important, and that is keeping your guitar in tune. You should be checking your guitar's tuning regularly. I would say, every couple of days at the very least, so maybe every 2 practice sessions, you should be checking your guitar's tuning. And you might say, well, if I'm not moving it around very much, or if it's just staying in my room, what's the harm, right? And fair enough, it's not exactly obvious, because a lot of times guitars, especially if you're not moving them, they go out of tune very slowly. Although if you're from where I am here in Wisconsin, we have all sorts of weather fluctuations, humidity fluctuations that cause the guitar to stretch and expand, and so it does get out of tune faster. But that's actually not really the point of why I think tuning the guitar is so important. One, I do think it's important to keep your guitar maintained, learn how to take care of your instruments. The second reason, and what I think is the most important reason, is that you need to start memorizing some of the anatomy of your guitar, specifically things like the string names. I run into this a lot where we'll talk quite a bit about, tuning and string names within the first month, and then we'll get going and we'll kind of start moving on to other things. And the assumption from my end is that you're going to keep tuning and remembering the little phrase or whatever that you have to tune the guitar. And then we get 3 or 4 months in and I say, okay, play me the 3rd fret on the A string. And they look back at me like, what's the A string? You should know, especially 3 to 4 months in, what the name of each of the strings are. You should know the low E, A, D, G, B, and the high E. So that way, if I ask you to play a specific string, you can find it, and you can make your way. You can repeat information back to me. Say, "Oh, I'm here." Right? It's about being able to log that information, and it's also about being able to effectively communicate, not just between me and you, but also between you and any other person you might eventually end up interacting with. Especially if that's your goal down the line, you need to be able to communicate. So, anyways. Keep your guitar in tune and practice memorizing the names of your strings. It's really important. Okay, so those are just 5 that I came up with really quickly off the top of my head. I could, I think, very easily come up with another 5. So if you guys want to see another 5, things that beginner guitar players often miss, or things I commonly see in newer guitar players, please let me know. I'd be happy to make another one. I was also thinking too, it might be kind of cool to do a video talking about people who are at the beginner phase and want to start working their way into that intermediate phase. What are things that you should really be doing to try and create incremental improvement and work up to that next level? I don't know. I'm always trying to come up with cool video ideas, whether that's for guitar or other stuff. So if you got stuff that you'd like to see or things you'd like me to cover, please let me know, either by emailing me or, if you're watching this on YouTube, in the comments section. I always love to see it. So anyways, thank you very much. My name is Alex Bennett. I appreciate you guys, and I will see you in the next video.